get-go.
Just want to start today with a trigger warning disclaimer. This podcast contains descriptions of death and drowning. Hi, I'm Katie Carpenter.
I'm Terry Kovanitz.
We apologize for any and all mistakes today as we begin this episode of Titanic Transcripts.
Okay, we're back to finish up Peuchen's testimony. Mr. Peuchen, you say when the impact occurred, the ship shuddered?
Yes, when the impact occurred, describing it, I would say it would be like a wave striking it, a very heavy wave.
How soon after that did the boat begin to list?
I should think about 25 minutes afterwards.
So far as you could observe, did the passengers have on life belts?
They had.
Before you left the boat, so you can say from your own knowledge they had them on.
I say if they had not them on, I think they could have gotten them on all right. I did not hear of any shortage of life preservers, or of any complaints, rather.
Did you have any light on your lifeboat?
Yes, we did.
What was its color?
Just an ordinary white light.
Not a green light?
No.
But a white light?
Yes.
Did you see other lights on lifeboats?
Yes. We could see all those different lifeboats that had lights. They were all over. They were not all staying together at all. Some of them were going east, west, north, and south, it seemed to me, but there was one boat that had sort of an electric light, and one a sort of bluish light as well, which we thought at first was a steamer or something.
I believe you said you have had considerable experience as a mariner.
Yes, sir.
Can you say whether the Titanic listed to the starboard or port side?
She listed to the starboard side, the side which she was struck on.
Did she go down by the bow or by the head?
Eventually, you mean?
Yes.
She was down by the bow. You mean the head by the bow, do you not?
Exactly.
It is the same thing.
No, not exactly the same thing. Where was the impact on the bow of the ship?
It was after the bow, about 40 feet, I should imagine, on the starboard side. About 40 or 50 feet, I should imagine, from where the ice had started to come off the iceberg.
You say you saw some ice on the deck?
Yes, sir.
Do you know of anyone being injured by ice on the deck?
No, but I know a great many of the passengers were made afraid by this iceberg passing their portholes. The ship shoved past this ice, and a great many of them told me afterwards they could not understand this thing moving past them, those that were awakened at this time. In fact, it left ice on some of the portholes, they told me.
Do you know of your own knowledge whether any alarm was sounded to arouse the passengers from their rooms after the impact?
There was no alarm sounded whatever. In fact, I talked with two young ladies who claimed to have had a very narrow escape. They said their stateroom was right near the Astors, I think almost next to it, and they were not awakened.
They were not awakened?
They slept through the crash, and then they were awakened by Mrs. Astor. She was in rather an excited state, and their door being open, and I think the Astor door was open, they think that was the means of their being saved.
On what deck were they?
I do not know, sir. It was only in conversation told to me on the Carpathia.
I think you said that from your judgment and from your own observation, there was no general alarm given.
No, I did not hear one, and I was around the boat all the time.
After getting aboard the Carpathia, did you learn the latitude and longitude in which the boats were picked up?
No, sir, I did not. All I know is that when I made inquiries for the nearest port, I was told it was 36 hours sail to Halifax.
Did you see those lifeboats on the port side of the ship? Were you on the port side?
I was on the port side.
Did you see them on the starboard side?
No, sir. We heard afterwards that the officers on the starboard side were more generous in allowing the men on than the port side. That's what I heard afterwards, that some of the officers on the starboard side had allowed some of the men in the boats.
You were on the same side with Mr. Lightoller?
That was the port side, yes.
The second officer?
Yes.
And on that side, they did not permit but 2 men to get into the first boat?
I think there were 4 sailors in the first boat, sir.
Not more than 4?
I would not be certain about that, sir. They did not allow any male passengers. That's what I mean.
Did you see any lifeboat that was caught in the gear or tackle?
No. The boats I saw lowered away very nicely indeed, in a very short time.
Did you see any collapsible boat lowered?
No, I think our boat left before they started to get those out.
Were those lifeboats taken aboard the Carpathia?
I think 2 or 3 boats were allowed to drift. One, I think, had some dead bodies in it. I saw 2 at least drifting away. I was afraid they could not take care of more.
You saw 2 or 3 drifting away?
That is, after they let them go.
Did you see any dead bodies in those drifting boats?
No, I saw dead bodies in one of the boats that came up, lying in the bow. I did not know whether that was set adrift or not. I was told that one boat contained 3 bodies.
Did you see Mr. Ismay that night?
I saw him. Well, which night?
Sunday night.
I think I saw him standing for a moment without his hat on. Just a moment on the port side.
On the boat deck?
On the boat deck, yes.
What time?
I should say it would probably be an hour after we had struck the iceberg.
An hour after you struck the iceberg.
I would not be certain. I think it was Mr. Ismay. I think I saw him standing for a moment.
And what was he doing? Anything?
Not at that time.
You did not see him after that?
I did not see him after that, except on coming aboard the Carpathia.
Did you see Mr. Hayes after he passed this word with you about the icebergs?
Yes. I saw him again on the upper deck just before I started to help with the boats. He said, "Peuchen, this boat is good for 8 hours yet."
And that is the last time you saw him?
Yes. I shook hands with him, and then he said, "This boat is good for 8 hours. I have just been getting this from one of the best old seamen, Mr. Crossley." I think he mentioned his name, "of Milwaukee, and someone else," he said. "Before that time, we will have assistance."
Do you know of the proximity of the Titanic to ice on Sunday?
No, sir. All I know is that there was a big change in the temperature between the afternoon and the time I went on deck later in the evening.
Did that indicate anything unusual to you?
I had only had experience once before among icebergs, and it was cold, and a similar change took place in the weather.
Have you ever been in the vicinity of the Grand Banks before?
No, this was on the Gulf of St. Lawrence, just as we were approaching the Gulf of St. Lawrence.
This change in temperature would not necessarily mean that there was ice in the immediate vicinity. It might occur just as the weather changes from morning to evening or from evening to morning?
Yes, sir. There was quite a change in temperature.
Who was the quartermaster? What was his name?
His name was...
Who was the quartermaster on your lifeboat, I mean?
I do not know exactly how to pronounce his name, but it is spelled Hichen. He was the man at the wheel Sunday evening.
Have you his initials?
No, he was Quartermaster Hitchens. I think probably you can find him. But he was the man at the wheel, and he was calling out to the other boats wanting to know what officer was on duty at that time. He did not seem to know which officer at the time of the sighting of the iceberg was on duty.
What was the movement of the ship after the collision with the iceberg?
After the collision, it seemed to me not immediately, but after a short space of time, it sounded as though we were reversing.
What effect did that have upon the progress of the ship, if you noticed?
She was still going, even if they were reversing for a certain period.
Did you observe how long she continued to go ahead?
No, I did not.
Did you form any idea as to how far she had gone beyond the iceberg after striking it before she stopped?
No, I was really too much interested in changing my clothes and in my friends, and I really did not pay any attention to that.
Have you any idea how far you were away from the iceberg when you took to the lifeboat?
We took to the lifeboat. I should imagine I was in the lifeboat probably an hour after we struck. We'd been going ahead at a pretty good rate of speed, and then we had to reverse. So I should imagine we would be 3 miles away from it, I think, or at least 2.5 probably.
After you took to the lifeboat, you proceeded to row in the direction in which the ship had been moving westward?
No, we started right off from the port side of the boat, directly straight off from her, about a midship on the port side, right directly north, I think it would be, because the northern lights appeared where this light we had been looking at in that direction appeared shortly afterwards.
When did you first see an iceberg?
A year ago?
No, I did not mean that. I meant on that occasion. You did not see the iceberg the ship struck, I understand.
No, I did not see that.
When did you first see an iceberg there?
Just after daybreak or just a little before daybreak?
Can you give us an idea of how far you probably were at that time from where the Titanic went down?
I should imagine we would be probably 2 miles, and we kept on rowing for this imaginary light for some time.
How far away from you was this iceberg, and in what direction?
There were several icebergs. There were at least 3 icebergs that you could see plainly. There was one toward the front, the way our boat was facing, and one on the west. I should think there was one toward the north and one toward the south. We seemed to be in a nest of icebergs, with some smaller ones, of course.
About how many in all that you can recall?
I think you could see, at least to count, I think 5.
What were about the sizes of them?
2 were rather large, and another was sort of smaller in size. Some were jagged but very high, and a number of them not so high.
These large ones, you think, were about what height above the water, and what width and length, if you can give us an idea?
They were at least 100 feet high, the 2 of them, and a width I should think of 300 feet and 400 feet long, somewhat like an island.
Major, do you mean for us to understand that at the time lifeboat number 4 and lifeboat number 6 on the port side of the ship were loaded and lowered, every woman in sight was given an opportunity?
Every woman on the port side was given an opportunity. In fact, we had not enough women to put in the boats. We were looking for them. I cannot understand why we did not take some men. The boats would have held more.
If there had been more women there, they could have found room in these boats?
Plenty of room.
Do you mean to say, too, that so far as you knew and heard and observed, no general alarm was given throughout the ship, arousing the passengers and advising them of danger?
I did not hear any alarm whatever.
Do you know what the method is of giving an alarm in an emergency of that kind?
I've never had the experience of an accident at sea before.
Major, can you give us any idea why, if the passengers were equipped with life belts and they were in good condition, those passengers would not float and live for 4 or 5 or 6 hours afterward?
Now that is something that astonished me very much. I was surprised when we steamed through this wreckage very slowly after we left the scene of the disaster. We left the ground as soon as this other boat, the Californian, I understand, came along. I was surprised that we did not see any bodies in the water. I understood the Californian was going to cruise around, and when she came we started off, and we went right by the wreckage. It was something like 2 islands, and was strewn along, and I was interested to see if I could see any bodies, and I was surprised to think that with all these deaths that had taken place, we could not see one body. I was very much surprised. I understand a life preserver is supposed to keep a person up, whether dead or alive.
You think the Carpathia passed in the immediate vicinity where the Titanic went down?
No, I wouldn't say the immediate vicinity, because there was a breeze that started up at daybreak, and the wreckage would naturally float away from where she went down somewhat. It might be that it had floated away probably a mile or half a mile. Probably not more than that, though, considering that the wind only sprang up at daybreak.
Have you any idea which way that drift would tend on account of the breeze or other conditions there?
Which way the wind was blowing, you mean?
Yes.
The wind was blowing, I imagine, from the north at that time.
You heard sounds of people calling for help when you were, you say, about 5/8 of a mile away when the Titanic went down?
Yes, sir.
And immediately you heard these cries, and then you heard them gradually die out.
Yes, sir.
Is it your idea that the water was so cold that a person could not live in it except for a short time?
I feel quite sure that a person could not live in that water very long. Those who had been in the water had their feet frozen. That is, those who were standing up in a boat in the water. I happened to have the cabin with 3 of them who were rescued, and they said they sustained their life by punching each other during the 2 or 3 hours they stood up. The minute anyone got tired and sat down in the water, or at least very shortly thereafter, he floated off the raft dead, I believe.
What was the temperature of the water, if you know?
I do not know, sir.
You say people were frozen?
Their feet were frozen, yes, sir.
Was that by exposure after being taken out of the water on the boat?
Yes, sir. A number of them swam. I know of 3 cases at least, where they jumped from the big boat and swam and got onto a raft, which was partly submerged in the water. And then they stood up on the raft, and those are the ones whose feet were badly swollen or frozen.
You assume from that the water was very cold?
I am sure it was.
Was it below the freezing point?
It must have been very near the freezing point anyway. It probably would not be quite freezing, but it being salt water, of course, it would not freeze very readily.
Was there any floating ice aside from these icebergs?
Oh, yeah. When we started to steam away, we passed a lot of floating ice. I suppose several miles long.
You mean the Carpathia steamed through the ice?
Yes.
Did you come into contact with floating ice while you were on the lifeboat?
No, sir, we did not.
Have you any idea as to how long a person could live in water like that?
It depends on his constitution, but I should imagine that if a person could stay in the water half an hour, he'd be doing very well.
would not the effort to swim and exercise prevent one getting numb for several hours?
Up to a certain point, yes, but I do not think a man could live an hour in that water.
Did you observe in this wreckage any broken pieces of life preservers, corks, or things like that?
There was a very large quantity of floating cork. I'm at a loss to understand where it came from. There were a great many chairs in the water, all the steamer chairs were floating, and pieces of wreckage, but there was a particularly large quantity of cork.
What was the appearance of the cork? Did it look as if it had come from life preservers?
I was not near enough to tell that. I would not like to pass an opinion, but it did look like cork to me.
You said, I believe, that there seemed to be a lack of competent sailors to take charge of the lifeboats?
Well, I would not like to say that, sir. I said that they were not at their stations ready to man the boats. I imagine this crew was what we would call in yachting terms a scratch crew, brought from different vessels. They might be the best, but they had not been accustomed to working together.
Did you see any other boats filled, that is, loaded and lowered?
Those were the only two I saw filled and lowered.
Did you see the boats as the Carpathia reached them? Did the boats come to the Carpathia, or did the Carpathia go around and pick up the boats?
I do not know whether she came to anchor. I think she probably did. However, she was in the lee of all the boats. That is, we had all come down. We were to the weather of the Carpathia, and so she stayed there until we all came down on her.
Did you observe in what manner these boats reached the Carpathia? What position was your boat in, for instance, among the first or the last?
I think there were about 2 or 3 after us. We were almost the last, like about the last, with the exception of 2 or 3.
Did you observe the condition of these boats as to whether they were all loaded to their capacity or not at the time that you saw them unloaded?
I saw some of the boats come in. One boat particularly was very full, had a large number of passengers. She seemed to be crowded right down. Whether they had taken on more in the water, I do not know.
Do you know what boat that was, the number of it, or the officer in charge?
No, sir. There seemed to be a lot of steerage or second-class passengers in that boat, but still, I did not know them by sight.
Was it a collapsible boat?
No, that was one of the regular lifeboats.
The boat you were in, you say, could have carried how many more people than you had?
Well, I made inquiries, and I was told that those boats were capable of holding from 60 to 65. I suppose according to how they were stowed and how the boat was trimmed and the weight of the passengers. But I should imagine they ought to hold a good number. They seemed very solid and strong boats. I was told by the second officer, though, that they could not lower the boats filled to full capacity. That was the capacity with them floating, according to the figures given.
And the idea was to fill them after they reached the water?
It struck me that those boats ought to have a certain capacity on the hooks, and then be loaded up to that capacity, and then they should have some means of filling them in the water, yes.
There were none attempted to be loaded except from the rail?
That's the only place I saw any boats loaded, sir.
Referring to that light that you observed, that you said you thought was a hallucination, did that disappear after a while?
Yes, it disappeared, but I did not think, from my knowledge of yachting, that it was a boat light. I think it was one of those reflected lights. The northern lights were very strong that night. It might have been some reflection on ice. I was not satisfied it was the light of a steamer by any means.
You could not tell then, of course, whether it might have been a stern light or what sort of light it might be on a steamer.
It was a glare. It was not a distinct light. It was a glare.
Did Mr. Ismay give any directions or orders on the boat, as far as you know?
On which boat, sir?
On the ship. You say you saw him there.
Only standing there. He did not in my presence.
Major, you say this was a clear night.
A clear night, yes.
Was it as clear while you were on the water in this boat as it was prior to the catastrophe?
Yes. It was a beautiful night. It was a dark night, but starlight. We could see some distance. We could see another boat without a light, some distance away, by the shadow.
And you were how many hours on the water, do you think?
I think we were rather late in getting to the Carpathia. I imagine that we were at least 8 hours on the water.
About what time did you get to the Carpathia?
It was after 8 o'clock that I looked at my watch, so it was something after 8 o'clock that we got on.
And what time did the dawn come?
We could just commence to distinguish light, I think about near 4 o'clock.
What was that answer?
About 4 o'clock.
Prior to 4 o'clock, while you were drifting in the water, did you see any icebergs?
No, we did not drift near anything. We saw...
When the dawn came, did you find yourself near icebergs?
We found that there was a sort of field of icebergs. There were icebergs in one direction, probably a mile away, and another iceberg in another direction, probably half a mile away, and another iceberg over here, probably 5 miles away.
Were there any ice fields?
I did not notice any in the morning. I was busy rowing because I rowed the whole time, but when we when we started to steam away on the Carpathia, I could see this ice field like 4 miles long.
Did you observe any of these ice fields before you got on the Carpathia?
No, I did not. Well, I could see something like an island at a distance, but it was not as clear when we got on the Carpathia.
But you think when the dawn came, the nearest iceberg was about half a mile away?
It was farther than that. In rowing the boat, I know that we thought at first we would have to row close to the iceberg, and we were then about 5 miles off at least. It was a question whether we were going to get very close to this island of ice or not. The iceberg was between our boat and the Carpathia.
All the icebergs were not between you and the Carpathia?
No, this was the only one.
And the others were in different directions?
Yes.
At all points of the compass?
Yes.
How do you account for the fact that you were not able to see any of these icebergs when you were in the water before the dawn and you were able to see a boat?
Well, they were a little further away than the boat, but we picked these icebergs out pretty early in the morning before dawn. They were dark objects. In fact, we didn't know what they were at that time.
Is it your observation that on a night of that kind, glasses enable one to get a wider range of vision?
Yes, we use glasses at night, especially when the night is bright. There's such a difference in the human eye. Take 12 men on a yacht, and one man will see twice as far as another.
Without glasses?
Yes, sir.
I mean at night, such a night as you had that night. Would glasses add very much to the range of your vision?
I think they would. I can see better with glasses at night than I can with my naked eye.
Have you any idea how much they add to the range?
Well, for instance, if you look at the moon at night with a glass, you can see everything distinctly, and from the naked eye you cannot.
How is it with reference to objects on the sea?
I think glasses assist you, provided it is bright enough.
And you think that night was bright enough?
I think it would assist. I really think if we had a searchlight, though, we would have saved the ship.
You say the second officer told you that he could not lower the lifeboats safely if they were filled to their capacity?
Yeah, the second officer sent for me on board the Carpathia, as he had heard some complaints from the ladies about this quartermaster. And while we were there, I asked him regarding the loading of these boats, and he stated that these boats were filled just nicely for lowering from the height of the deck.
He told you this after the Titanic had gone down?
Yes. I cannot understand why they have such a very heavy block and tackle if they can only put in such a small number of people, because the tonnage of 24 people is only about 1.5 tons English tons.
Well, Major, some of these boats contain many more people than were in your boat.
Yes, but whether they were picked up afterwards or not, I do not know.
Or whether they were lowered from the Titanic, you do not know?
No, sir.
You heard nothing of that kind while these two boats were being lowered?
Heard what?
Did you hear the second officer say that they could only be partially filled and lowered with safety?
No, he made a remark of that kind, sir. I think it was a case that we had no more ladies to put in there.
You had no more ladies to put in, and they were to be lowered without being filled.
Well, I do not know exactly what filled means in that sense, filled from the deck. I spoke to the officer about it a couple of days afterwards, and he told me that was the reason they were not filled, that they were just comfortably filled for lowering that distance.
Did you see any rockets fired on the Titanic during the 15 or 20 or 30 minutes before her sinking?
Well, I do not know as to the time before sinking, but while we were lowering the boat, they were sending up rockets.
Sending them from your deck?
From the bridge, I should say.
What color rockets? Red and all colors?
A good deal like an ordinary sky rocket, going up and breaking and the different colors flying down.
Do you know why they were being exploded?
Because we wanted assistance.
Did you know that any assistance was available?
No, I think if there was assistance available, we should have been told of it when we left the boat. We were rowing around there, and if we had known that some ship was coming, we would not have started off rowing for an imaginary light, trying to make a great many miles. I do not know whether they had that information or not.
Did you hear the testimony that there was a light sighted or boat sighted about 5 miles ahead of the Titanic after the collision?
I read in the morning paper that some evidence was given yesterday in regard to that.
But you did not hear anything about that on the Carpathia?
No, and I did not see it.
When you and Mr. Hayes went forward to look at the ice, how much of it could you see?
I should think about 4.5 feet of ice, probably 1.5 to 2 inches thick. That is, it would be thicker on the rail than it would be on the bow. I heard the men walking over it, and it would crunch under their feet.
Do you mean to be understood as saying that you saw that part of the berg that was sloughed off by the impact?
Yes, sort of shaken off. As we went past, this would scrape off.
Did you look at the iceberg itself?
Oh, I did not see that. It had passed.
You did not see that?
No, sir.
You could not describe its color or how it appeared?
No, sir.
Did you talk with Mr. Fleet, the man in the lookout, who was in your lifeboat?
Yes, sir.
About this iceberg?
Yes, I spoke to him about it.
And what did you say to him about it?
Well, I was interested when I found he was in the crow's nest, and I said, "What occurred?" In the conversation, he said he rang 3 bells, and then he signaled to the bridge.
Did he say how far off the iceberg was when he first sighted it?
No, he did not tell me that.
Did he say what it looked like when he first saw it?
No, he did not go into that. The only thing he said was that he did not get any reply from the bridge.
From the telephone?
I heard afterwards that really the officers were not required to reply.
That is, the information is imparted from the crow's nest to the officer at the bridge, and that is the end of the information?
I spoke to the second officer on the boat regarding the conversation, and he told me it's simply a matter of whether the officer wishes to reply or not. He gets the information, probably, and acts right on it without attempting to reply to the crow's nest.
Did he tell you anything more about the iceberg and the collision that you have stated?
That is all. They had some conversation. The quartermaster was asking them who was on the bridge, and they were calling over, and they did not know which officer was on the bridge, and the quartermaster called out to another boat, to the quartermaster or whoever was in charge of the other boat.
Another lifeboat?
Yes, sir.
From your boat?
Yes, sir. They were not far off.
And what did he say?
I didn't catch the answer.
No, I mean, what did the quartermaster say?
He said, "You know, one officer was on duty on the bridge at the time we struck. So far as I could gather, the officer was in command of the other boat. He did not know. He might not have been on duty."
And the lookout in the crow's nest did not seem to know?
No.
I would like to ask whether, from what you observed, in your opinion, there was proper discipline on the part of the crew in loading the lifeboats?
You wish to know whether there was discipline in loading the lifeboats by the crew?
Yes. Whether there was any order or discipline about it, whether they were loaded systematically and with care and with consideration for the lives of the passengers and considering the peril in which they were placed.
Among those of the crew that I saw working, such as loading the boats, lowering the boats, and filling the boats, the discipline could not have been better.
The discipline could not have been better.
No, sir, but there were too few.
Too few of them?
Too few, yes. That is, I'm only speaking now of the port side of the boat where I happen to be. I cannot speak of all over the boat.
No, I said from your observation.
Yes, just from that. I was surprised not to see more sailors at their stations. I was also surprised that the boats were not filled with more people.
Each boat constitutes a station?
Yes, that is what I understand.
Each lifeboat?
Yes.
And from your observation, do I understand you to say that there was not a sailor at each station?
Oh, I do not say there was not a sailor at each station, but there was not a full complement.
There was not the full complement?
No, sir. From what I gathered, I understand that these men had been told off. That is, each man had been assigned to his station, but they had no practice, from what I learned from talking with the crew.
Did you see any drill yourself?
Oh, no. There was no drill. As a rule, Sunday is the day they do some drilling, but I didn't see any drilling on Sunday.
Would you have been likely to see it if it had occurred?
Yes, it's very interesting, and I always like to see it. There is always the bugle sounding the call. I have seen it crossing many times, the fire drill and the boat drill.
You saw no drill from the time you left Southampton until the time this accident occurred?
No, sir.
Did you, before or after the Titanic struck, learn that it was officially known to the ship on Sunday that there were icebergs on or near her track?
I heard it afterwards, but not before.
Not before Sunday?
I heard on the Carpathia that they were expecting icebergs or ice.
From whom did you hear it?
I heard the third officer just mention it, casually, to 2 or 3 of them, that they knew there was ice, that they were approaching ice.
What time of the day was this?
I do not know. I was on the it was on the fore part of the Carpathia.
The fore part of the journey on the Carpathia?
Yes.
Did they seem to be quite agreed that that was the case, or was there just some dispute about it?
No, there was no dispute. This was just a casual remark that was made.
You do not know by whom?
Yes, I know it was made by the third officer.
By the third officer?
Yes.
Is there anything further? I think that is all, Major.
Could I make just a little statement, sir? It will not be very long.
Oh, yes, of course.
I've been quoted as making a great many statements or saying several things, and I would like to just put this straight. I do not criticize Captain Smith, but I do criticize the policy and methods pursued by the company. For I feel sure that in this case, caution would have been of every virtue and would have averted the terrible calamity. I have been given the credit of saying many things which are absolutely untrue, and I wish to state that I have not said any personal or unkind thing about Captain Smith. I have been quoted as saying some very unkind things about the late captain, but I assure you I have never made any statement of that kind.
Did you ever sail with him before?
No, sir.
Is that all you care to say, Major?
That is all. I am here, sir, more on account of the poor women that came off our boat. They asked me if I would not come and tell this court of inquiry what I had seen, and when you wired me, sir, I came at once, without being pressed in any way, simply to carry out my promise to the poor women on our boat.
The committee is greatly obliged, Major. You will be excused. Wow, that was action-packed.
Yeah, we lost our gentle, uninterrupting senator. He starts interrupting this time, and then I'm like, oh no, they're not the same thing.
Oh, that cracked me up so bad.
Our master Navy guy and yachtsman.
Yeah. And he's like, oh yeah, exactly. That made me laugh.
What I meant. No, they're not the same thing. You misunderstand me.
And clearly, this Major Peuchen knows what he's talking about.
Oh, you can hear his experience.
And
I'm really glad that they called him as a witness.
His perceptions and his descriptions are so
yeah, he definitely does his
on.
due diligence as well. So many times with the I asked around about that, or I made inquiries. Like he very much he's going to get to the bottom of it before anybody else.
Yeah, he's cleared up a lot of things for me. It was like once the lifeboats were in the water, how chaotic it was. Everybody going in different directions and nobody.
Yeah, I can imagine because they had no one told them anything, and some people, as we know, thought they were going to be coming back, so they're hovering.
Oh, and I wanted to say about, this was from last time, but when the guy that was blowing the whistle for the boats to come back, how they must have felt when nobody came back.
Oh.
Because I'm blowing the whistle, I'm expecting...
I forgot about that.
I know,
oh, no.
it's been bothering me since
sorry,
then.
headphone users. Oh, that's right. Oh, no.
It just really made me sad.
Poor guy. I didn't realize that, I guess it makes sense, but it's just wild to think that he was saying some of the passengers saw the iceberg through the porthole.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah, that would be a cause for panic. Very good.
We got some name drops in here too, the Astors, and their panic helping somebody else get rescued, which is good.
True.
And then we were poking around about Ismay again. Not getting much this time, but, poking around. Go ahead.
And if your team Ismay, you really have to empathize with him when the people that saw him on the deck, that he was just standing there. And it must have been so overwhelming that my baby is... Oh, yeah. This is not
of
good.
Course. Yeah, and then we have to remember, too, still most everyone thinks it's unsinkable.
And it's the third day out.
Yeah, it's the third day out, so I
think he knew it was going to sink, just the way he just stood there.
Yeah, and then when he said, you better get a move on to the one guy, because, again, we're hearing there's not a huge sense of urgency until the last couple boats. It's so wild to me, we've heard it from many people, but, there just were no women left. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, that's not true. There are a ton of women on the boat.
But not on the deck.
But there was also knowing, as a passenger yourself, knowing that there was no alarm sounded, go get some.
Yeah.
Run down
sound
and holler.
An alarm. Somebody.
Yeah.
Send someone screaming. Else to sound an alarm.
I get that everyone was very disciplined, but they were probably confused and not really certain. It doesn't sound like people were running up there.
It's like everybody was hoping someone else would do it or take care of it.
Or thought it had been done. I agree with what he said about it being a scratch crew and that they, if it's only their third day out, they don't know what they're doing and they're not used to working together. You don't have that flow yet, which really I think affected things a lot. But I can't believe that not anybody was, go run and grab
Yeah.
some. Especially thinking
Somebody's-
like, oh, we've got 8 hours left. We'll be, somebody will be here by then.
Oh, that probably made a lot of people think they didn't need
They
to
didn't
sound
need
an
to get
alarm,
up.
but they got on the boat, didn't they?
Yeah, and at the same
You're gonna
time,
get
if
on the
you think you
lifeboat,
have 8
then you-
hours left, to go get somebody.
Yeah, and if you think it's serious enough to get on a lifeboat, maybe it's serious enough to go wake somebody up.
Yeah.
Sound an alarm. That bothered me.
And then again, we have the no bodies
Yeah.
floating mystery.
They should have drifted the same way as the wreckage drifted.
Yeah, I would think. And then it's perplexing. I don't know. And, he said he doesn't want to make a firm opinion on it, but that he thought he saw cork
Yeah.
out and about.
Was it just breaking up? Because that picture you posted
Yeah, I
on
was going to
Facebook,
say, we've seen the...
it looked like it was really contained.
Yeah, it
so-
looks very similar to a modern-day life jacket.
And that the filling of that wouldn't just go floating around.
I'm not sure.
So that was weird. And then, that they were punching each other.
Yeah, I was just going to
my
get
God.
to that.
Oh.
Because as soon as somebody sat down, then they were gone. So
Floated off the raft dead, I believe.
so you had to punch and get punched,
Oh, my
and your feet
God.
are freezing. And
Oh.
I didn't think about that, having like water on the bottom of the boat.
Oh, well, the one that was upside down, yeah.
Yeah.
It just, that just horrified me. Those poor people. Oh, and that he said it was so cold that a person could only be alive for half an hour in that water if they were really strong.
Yeah. So that's very, makes it, I mean, the whole thing is real, but when you hear that kind of stuff, it makes it feel more real to me. And then I really, really I hope that we hear from Hitchens.
Oh, we
whether
better
he's
hear
gonna,
from Hitchens.
whether he's gonna open up or not, but the fact that the women experienced it, and just everybody on his, but it sounds like his was predominantly women, but the fact that they experienced this, how horrible this guy was, and then they were like begging him to make sure that he goes to the stand, and also even on the Carpathia, they were telling Mr. Lightoller about how horrible he was.
Well, I think Fleet said that he was still in New York. Not in Washington for the hearings. No, he's still in, but he wasn't. He wasn't.
Oh, but no, he was detained
stuck.
or something.
No,
did
he
he
wasn't
say?
detained. The other guy was.
Oh, okay.
But the other guy in the light or in the
crow's
lookout.
nest. Yeah.
But no, he just happened to just stick around and not come down here.
Oh yeah, we're probably never going to hear from him again.
And
he's smart.
And another back from the beginning of this interview, the stowaway. Do you think?
I forgot they had a stowaway.
Do you think he stowed away before the ship left?
Yeah, is he a Titanic
Southampton?
stowaway or a stowaway on the lifeboat?
Right. Did he just wake up? He said, you tuck in for the night, back in my little lifeboat, and then now it's moving and everybody's getting in.
I don't know, kind of.
It's kind of...
I kind of think, because
how else would he know to hide in there?
Yeah, I feel like he wouldn't have had time to pull that off. When they pull the lifeboat down, he would have had to already be in there.
And I'll look into it and get back to it if we find out. But I was just thinking about that stowaway, how startling, and maybe that's what broke his arm.
Oh, yeah, when they lowered the boat
and
people getting
on
in.
it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Can't make a peep.
I hope to find out more about that.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm excited to learn what you find.
And then a couple discrepancies I noticed. That he was saying how clear it was and that you could see an iceberg and you could see the other boats, and other people were like, it was so dark we couldn't see a thing.
Well,
I didn't know where anybody was.
I did make a note too, the Northern Lights, first of all, what a waste. The Northern Lights, so beautiful over this tragedy.
And
that
such a calm,
paints a
perfect
different
night.
picture. But then you'd be able to... Yeah, I don't know.
So, but others are like, couldn't see
the one guy
thing.
said the temperature change has nothing to do with it, and then Peuchen says that the temperature change does have something to do with it, and it happened the only other time he was around an iceberg.
Yeah, and one more discrepancy I found was Fleet, who we really like, telling Peuchen that he didn't get a reply from the bridge.
Oh, I thought that didn't sound right.
Which we know he did.
Yeah, I was trying to remember as I was reading, but I thought...
Because he was like, well, they asked me what I saw. I mean, what did you see?
Yeah.
So it was very clear that they responded to him.
And, or maybe
they said thank you.
Didn't get a response in terms of what to do next. But I don't know. Because then when he was talking to
until
the
other
second
guys
officer,
come.
they said, "Oh, well, it's his, if he decides to call back or not, or answer." So
Right.
that's interesting.
But it was very clear that he
yeah.
asked what he saw and then said thank you. So that's
so
a
we
that's a
either have some
discrepancy.
bad
That's
memories
just
or
a
people being
discrepancy.
scared.
Because he felt strongly enough about it to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting.
Oh boy, yeah, we're getting into it now. All right, go ahead.
And then finally, and this just is, it's like a gut punch. Because on the one side of the boat, they were letting male passengers in to help with the rowing. And the other part of the boat, they were not. So which side you ended up on determined if you were alive or not.
Yeah.
If you were a man.
If you were a man, yeah.
That gave me goosebumps.
I also don't understand, like he said, if there were no women to be found and nobody wants to run and go get some. And I know the ship is massive, and I know that's not a quick thing, but still, I think it could have been done.
An alarm could have been sounded easily.
But, yeah, like he said, then why didn't we just put more men in?
Yeah, that just, no, we're just going to leave it empty. That it's so, the side that you were on really had a lot of play in
how wild
the rest of your life. And that really bothered me. And on that sad note, we're going to call it a day. See you next time.
As always, thank you for listening. Please be sure to let us know what you're thinking in the comments or at titanictranscripts@gmail.com. Also be sure to check out our Facebook page, Titanic Transcripts, for more interesting tidbits and general discussion.